everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Brooklynite TV podcast. It's a place where we like to discuss the most pressing issues currently affecting our city. And I'm your host, Frank, and today we're discussing the issue why Brooklyn and New York City are witnessing a surge of protests that have spiraled into unprecedented levels of violence and destruction, causing millions of dollars in damage to our city. Now, according to a recent New York Post article, agitators have caused significant destruction, including extensive damage to New York City, Brooklyn, and City College, amounting to approximately $3 million. Now, these individuals, some of who were captured on video wearing masks, have been charged, and rightfully so, with various offenses, including vandalism and destruction of property. The catalyst for these recent protests are rooted in the intensifying violence and what some are calling a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which has drawn widespread condemnation from various human rights organizations and international observers. Protesters in New York City have rallied in response to what they describe as disproportionate violence by Israel forces against Palestinians, particularly in Gaza, which is complete bullshit. Yet, this unrest has translated into chaotic actions on the street, where large crowds have gathered to voice their support for Palestine and demand change. Now, what's deeply concerning is that many of those individuals demanding action and change and doing these acts of violence seem to lack a clear understanding of the conflict they are protesting against. Now, it's apparent that there is a significant disconnect between the symbolic gestures of the protests and the complex realities of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Now, many of these participants appear to be acting out of a general sense of outrage rather than a well-informed perspective on the issue at hand. Now, this disconnect is not just about misinformed individuals. It reflects a broader trend where the nuances of international conflicts are often oversimplified in public discourse. Now, to make sense of the current unrest, it's essential to revisit the origins of the Israel-Palestine conflict, which is one of the most enduring and complex disputes in modern history. This conflict traces back to the late 19th century with the rise of Zionism, which aimed to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. At the time, Palestine was predominantly Arab. The tensions between Jews and Arabic communities began escalating, leading to a sporadic violence back then. The situation intensified in 1947 when the United Nations proposed a partition plan to create two separate states, Jewish and Arab. Now, Jewish leaders accepted the plan, but was rejected by the Arab states. This rejection led to the first Arab-Israel War in 1948, resulting in the establishment of the State of Israel and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. A catastrophe that Palestinians referred to as the Nakba. Now, since then, there have been numerous conflicts, including the Six-Day War in 1967, which resulted in Israel occupying the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Various peace processes have been attempted, but a final resolution remains elusive due to the disputes over the borders, the status of Jerusalem, and the right of the return for Palestine refugees. Now, let's turn our attention to Hamas, a significant player in the current conflict. They were founded in 1987. Hamas is an Islamist militant group that originated as an offshoot of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. Its charter calls for the complete destruction of Israel and the establishment of an Islamic State in Palestine. Now, this is important. Hamas is recognized as a terrorist organization by several countries, including the United States, Israel, and the European Union. Now, the group has been responsible for numerous attacks on Israel civilians and military personnel, including suicide bombings, rocket attacks, and other sickened forms of violence. These tactics have resulted in significant casualties and have exacerbated the cycle of violence in the region. Now, Hamas the group's extreme ideology and aggressive actions have not only fueled ongoing conflicts, but also further complicated efforts to achieve peace in their region. Hamas gained political power in 2006, winning Palestine legislative elections, and subsequently taking control of the Gaza Strip in 2007. Recently, Hamas has escalated its attacks on Israel in a shocking display of violence. In a particularly brutal incident, Hamas launched an attack on a festival in Israel, resulting in the deaths of thousands of people, similar to what happened to us on 9/11. Now, this attack was not only heinous. It was not only a heinous act of terrorism, but also a stark reminder of the ongoing and intensifying nature of the conflict. And it is this wretched act alone that has started this recent escalation in the region. Another critical aspect of Hamas's influence is its relationship with Iran. Iran has been a major supporter of Hamas, providing financial assistance, weapons, and training. This alliance is part of Iran's broader strategy to extend its influence in the Middle East and counterbalance the power of Israel and its allies. Now, the connection between Hamas and Iran underscores the geopolitical complexity of the conflict, as it involves not just regional players, but also global powers with competing interests. Now, in addressing the Israel-Palestine conflict, several steps need to be taken to work towards a resolution. The two-state solution remains one of the most widely discussed frameworks for peace, envisioning the creation of an independent Palestine alongside an independent Israel. Now, which could have already been done in 1947 when it was first proposed. However, effective international mediation by entities such as the United States and the United Nations and regional powers is necessary to facilitate any negotiations and ensure the implementation of any agreements. Another critical aspect of this conflict is the issue of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Israel views Iran's pursuit of nuclear technology with deep concern, fearing that a nuclear-armed Iran would pose a significant threat to its security. Now, Israel has consistently expressed its determination to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, citing concerns about potential aggression and the destabilizing effects on the Middle East. The U.S. support is vital for Israel in this regard, as it helps to ensure that Israel remains in a strong position to counter any potential threats and to influence international policies regarding Iran's nuclear ambitions. Some say that Israel should just wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. Now, the question of whether Israel could wipe Hamas off the face of the earth is a contentious one. Now, while Israel possesses significant military capabilities, such a course of action would likely have severe humanitarian consequences and will escalate the conflict further in that region. Furthermore, U.S. diplomatic backing plays a vital role in shaping international responses and facilitating peace negotiations. So it's incredibly frustrating to witness the fervent support some people show towards Palestine and Hamas without a proper understanding of the complexities involved. The support often seems to stem from a superficial grasp of the situation, leading to misguided endorsements of a group that, let's be clear, is recognized as a terrorist organization. Now, Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip, has a well-documented history of perpetrating violence against civilians, both in Israel and within Palestinian territories. Its charter explicitly calls for the destruction of Israel and has been responsible for numerous attacks that target innocent people. Now, the support for Hamas by some protesters not only reflects a profound ignorance of the group's violent nature, but also undermines the genuine plight of ordinary Palestinians who suffer as a result of such extremism. These protesters often conflate the broader Palestinian struggle for statehood with the actions of Hamas, therefore distorting the conflict and misrepresenting the reality of what's going on the ground. Now, instead of rallying behind a group that engages in terrorism, supporters should be advocating for peace and nonviolent solutions that address the root cause of the conflict rather than resorting to hatred and more violence. It's disheartening to see that so many people speaking out on this issue while clearly lacking the depth of knowledge required to engage meaningfully. The complexity of the Israel-Palestinian conflict demands more than just a superficial understanding or emotional responses. It requires a careful analysis of historical context, political dynamics, and the actions of all parties involved. Unfortunately, many who are vocal in their support for Palestine and Hamas seem to be driven more by ideological zeal than by genuine desire to contribute to a constructive resolution. Instead of contributing to the problem, these protesters would benefit greatly from going back to school instead of destroying it and educating themselves about the intricacies of the conflict. Learning about the historical grievances, the geopolitical stakes, and the varying perspectives within the region would provide a more nuanced view and foster more informed and effective advocacy. So destroying productive dialogue with poorly informed support only deepens divisions and hinders progress towards peace. And that's why it's crucial to approach such a complex issue with a well-rounded understanding and to advocate for solutions that promote long-term peace and justice for all parties involved, rather than falling into the trap of supporting extremist factions that perpetuate violence and suffering. In conclusion, the recent protests in Brooklyn and New York City, marked by substantial violence and destruction, highlight a significant disconnect from the complexities of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The role of Hamas, with its extreme ideology and ties to Iran, adds layers of complexity to an already complex situation. Addressing the conflict requires a multidimensional approach that includes security guarantees, humanitarian aid, and effective international mediation. Now, a potential Trump administration could play a significant role in shaping the future of this conflict, but any resolution must address the core issue at play. U.S. support for Israel remains crucial, both for its security and for further facilitating potential peace processes. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Brooklynite TV podcast. I hope this episode has provided you with a deeper understanding of the recent events and the broader context of the Israel-Palestine conflict. If you found this podcast interesting, I would ask that you like and share so others may find it interesting too. Thank you, and stay informed, stay engaged, stay safe, and join us next time on the Brooklynite TV podcast as we continue to explore pressing issues in our city. Again, take care till next time, stay safe everyone, and stop destroying shit.